about are 3 rules for showing. The first rule we've already talked about. And by the way, when I say 3 rules for showing, I mean these rules should be adhered to before you ever put the buyer in your car, before you show them property, before you even find properties for them. You need to establish these 3 rules with the buyer. The first we've talked about, and that is always have the buyer pre-approved. Note again, underlined there, pre-approved, not pre-qualified. It has to go to the underwriter to be pre-approved. The second is that you always have your buyer sign a buyer's brokerage agreement. Now, depending upon the state that you're in, this may be the norm, it may not be the norm. But let me ask you this. Would you work on a seller's property, trying to sell it, putting all of your time and energy in it, if you didn't have an agreement with them that they would pay you a commission? We call that an open listing in Florida. And an open listing is just simply like grabbing the wind. You've got absolutely nothing. Well, the same thing is true with a buyer. Don't put a buyer in your car until they've signed a buyer's brokerage agreement. Now, the buyer's brokerage agreement that we have just simply states that if the buyer looks at a property through me, that they agree to buy the property through me. Now, if they want to go to another broker that I haven't shown them, or if they see a for sale by owner, they want to go to that for sale by owner, that's fine. But if I show them a property, they are agreeing that they will buy that property. If they do buy it, that they will buy it through me. Now, let's talk logic for just a moment. If a buyer said, no, I'm not signing that, then basically what they're telling me is they're dishonest. Because what they're saying is, look, I'm going to use you to go out and find properties for me, and then in turn, I'm going to go over to my friend Jane, and I'm going to let her sell me the property because I want her to get the commission. So with this buyer's brokerage agreement, again, you're only looking at the properties that you have shown the buyer. Now, when you do work with a buyer, you're going to create some form of a tour book for the buyer, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But when you do that and you enter that information into your computer, you're literally registering that property with that buyer. The thing is that you don't really need to have the buyer sign off on every property that you show them. But don't put a buyer in your car unless they agree to sign a buyer's brokerage agreement. And all it means is that if they don't buy through you, that you have the right to sue them for a commission. The other broker will collect a commission as far as the seller is concerned. They'll collect it directly from the seller, but this gives you the right to go after the buyer for that commission because they violated this agreement. They had agreed to buy the property through you, and they went to another broker. Now, let's take this a step further. Let's suppose that for whatever reason, the buyer stops working with broker A, and they go to broker B. Now, broker B, if you're just logically thinking, there's going to be an overlapping of showings, simply because there are only so many properties out there that are going to fit a buyer's needs. And so broker B will eventually show a property that broker A showed. So what broker B should do is ask 2 questions. The first, have you worked with another broker? And the second question, did you sign a buyer's brokerage agreement? Now, let me explain how I've done this in my career. When they say, yes, I signed a buyer's brokerage agreement, I will tell them, if I show you a property that the other broker has already showed to you, please tell me and I'll take care of it. And then in turn, if they come to me and say, well, I already saw that property and, after I've looked at all these others, this is probably really the one that I'm going to have to buy or want to buy. And so at that point, what I'll do is I will get on the phone and I'll call the other broker. Now realize there's probably been a 2 or 3 month period of time since the other broker ever saw this buyer. But what I'll do is get on the phone and call the other broker. And I'll say to the other broker, I'm working with Mr. Smith, who had worked with you a few months ago, and they came to me and they have found a property, but they told me they signed a buyer's brokerage agreement with you. And in turn, I just wanted to let you know that they want to buy the same property you showed them, but they want to buy it through me. I'll split the commission with you 50-50. Now, only under one circumstance, only once, have I ever had a salesperson say, no, I want it all. And in that particular situation, I went back to the buyer and recommended to the buyer that they go back to that first broker if they really want this house, because the other broker said they will sue them. And the buyer said, in the vernacular, screw them. Let's go find something else. and the other broker got nothing. But offering them half of that commission, the reputation that I have always tried to have follow me in real estate is that I will do anything I have to do to help the other broker make the sale. Anything, and that includes giving up a commission. That would also include that. Now, number 3 rule, make sure the buyer is honest with you. Now, what I mean by honesty here is not honest, dishonest. I mean that they are candidly honest in their thoughts about what they think about each property. You see, in between the showings, there's going to be a lot of give and take, and all of that is part of the qualification process, by the way. But buyers are reluctant in many cases to tell you negatives, and the reason is simply they don't want to offend you. They're afraid if they offend you, you're not going to want to show them any more properties. You see, you have the golden key. You have the key to the MLS, and it's your gas. You're showing them these properties, and if all of a sudden they say, look, I told you I don't like that. I don't like this neighborhood. I don't know that you're going to say, well, you know, I'm not going to show you any more properties. So what they'll do is tell you all the good things, but not the bad. So during the interview, the sit-down interview, 30 to 60 minutes, you need to establish this rule. And that is that just tell them, I have a very thick skin. And please, if I show you something that really offends you or something you don't like, please tell me. I hope it doesn't happen, but if it does, tell me, because I don't want to make the same mistake twice. And so make sure that they're candidly honest with you. The next thing is that you want to preview first. Now, this statement goes without saying that you should preview a property before you show it, but many times that's not possible. Now, I don't know about your office, but in most of the offices here in Florida, we have what is called a caravan. And the caravan is a tour where the associates within an office will go out and they'll preview all the listings that that office and other adjacent offices of their company have also taken, and preview those. And it's called a caravan. And so in turn, those are all our in-house listings. What I'm going to show you how to do here is to create your own personal caravan day. And what I mean by that is about maybe once a week, go out and preview 3 to 5 properties in the areas that you're going to be working. Now, when you do this, take notes on everything. Last week we talked about, last week on the webinar, we talked about the listing presentation. And I said, take notes on everything. And then I made the comment that you should say, just a moment, I want to make sure I get that, to make sure that they recognize that you're writing all of this down. Well, do the same thing on this preview. And then when you finish, you write the address on the front. And in turn, you take that sheet and you put it into a previewed folder. Now, jump ahead 30 days. 30 days from today, you have a buyer that calls in reference, let's say, to one of your listings. And in turn, as they begin to tell you what they're looking for, you realize it's not the property they're calling in reference to. At that moment, what you're going to do is go through, in your mind, go through that folder and all the properties that you're previewed. This is giving you a better than even chance that you have at some point in the past previewed the property that you will be showing them. Many times it's very difficult if somebody calls you and says they want to see a property to go out and preview it before you actually show it to them. The next thing that you want to do is create a tour book for a buyer. Now, our company uses a program that creates an actual tour book that we bind and have all of the properties within it. And there's a lot of them on the market. Ours is called Toolkit. There's another one called CMA Plus. But even if you were just to take the MLS information sheet and bind those together, that could be your tour book. But you want to give each of the parties a tour book, and then you also want to have one for yourself. Now, when I say tour book, each tour book should have no more than 5 properties within it. And what I mean by that is on a tour, you should never show more than 5 properties at a time. Now, this doesn't mean 5 properties in a day. You might end up showing 5 this morning, 4 this afternoon, and 3 this evening. But you always have a separation in between the tours, and each tour has its own book. The obvious reason for that is that if you were to make up a book with 10 to 15 or 20 properties in them that you found for them, and then take them out, they all get muddled in their mind, and they're confused, and they can't decipher from one to the other. So you want to separate them into tours. And as I said, you also want to make one for yourself. Have that on the front seat. You don't want them to ask you a question about a property, and you have to say, reach over the back seat and say, let me see your book for a moment.